The laughter was still rolling round the bright ballroom at Ockley Hall when Jane Weller went down on one knee before the Duke of Cairncross and held up her gloved hand. Behind her, Lady Evelina's fashionable friends laughed on, fans up, framing their mouths rather than hiding them. "Your Grace," Jane said, clear enough that no one could later swear she had faltered. "It is leap year, and I claim the old custom. Will you marry me?" Something small and white rolled from Lady Evelina's glove, crossed the polished floor, and clicked against the Duke's shoe. He looked down at it. 6 small clicks answered from along the wall, ivory gaming fish closing inside 6 gloved hands. "Yes," said the Duke of Cairncross. "One condition. There will be a waltz at every Friday assembly until the season ends, and Miss Weller dances each with me." The sound went ragged, tried to gather itself, and died before it found its feet. Jane stayed where she was, down on Lady Evelina's floor, hands still out, because she had rehearsed the ridicule for 3 days, and the rehearsal had never once included yes. She had agreed to be laughed at for 2 months, because her sister's bed depended on it. She had never agreed to be accepted. He took her outstretched hand and raised her to her feet. His glove was cool. His face, this near, was not cold, so much as shut, a house with the knocker taken off the door. 6 years as a paid companion had taught Jane how a ballroom sorts its people. Those who may stand at the centre of the floor, and those who hold the shawls at the edge of it. The centre had just been handed to the woman brought here to be the evening's joke, and no one knew what to do about it, least of all the woman. Lady Evelina recovered first. She clapped twice, lightly. "How charming! Your Grace has more wit than we allow him. He has out-joked us all." I was not joking. He never glanced at her. He bent, picked the small white thing off the floor, and put it in his pocket. Lady Evelina's smile stayed exactly where it was, held there by plain force of will. "You cannot mean to hold Miss Weller to a parlour game, Your Grace." "I mean to hold myself to my answer," he said. "What Miss Weller does with hers is her own affair." The musicians had been given no instruction for any of this. After a pause, and some visible conferring, they struck up the waltz that had been meant to play Jane's shame out of the ballroom. The Duke turned to her as if the music were a servant who had entered on time. "The county has had my answer, Miss Weller. It has not had yours. Will you dance this with me? Refuse, and I will hand you to a chair, and that will be the end of the evening." She gave him her hand because refusing would cost more than he could know, and because some part of her, still ringing like a struck glass, wanted to see his face when he had to follow the joke to the floor. He danced well. That was the strangest part. The music gave them a phrase at a time to speak under, and at the first turn she spent hers. "Do not mistake compliance for gratitude, Your Grace. I am dancing with you. I am not grateful to you." "Understood," he said. The music carried them past Lady Evelina, past the fans. "Then I will spend my phrase as well. Tonight I answered for you in front of the county. That will not happen again. Each Friday I will put the question to you fresh, and if you refuse, the refusal stands, and no harm follows from me." "You cannot promise that no harm follows." "No," he said. "I can promise it will not come from my direction." She looked up at him then for the first time since the proposal had left her mouth. Nothing in his face explained him. He had been meant to refuse. Every soul in this ballroom, herself included, had been promised his refusal as surely as weather. "Why," she said, "one word, all the phrase would hold. Not tonight." By the second turn of the floor, nobody at Ockley Hall was laughing at anything. Somewhere by the long windows, a fan snapped shut. Nobody opened another one. The county watched the coldest man it owned steer its poorest gentlewoman through the figure with the floor theirs by right, and the silence in that bright long mirrored space was louder than the joke had ever managed to be. When the music closed, he bowed over her hand, Exactly correct. Lady Evelina was already there at his shoulder, her voice pitched low and pleasant. "You pick something up off my floor, Your Grace. Do you know what it is?" He drew the small white counter from his pocket, a flat ivory oval with a crescent nicked into one edge, and closed his fist on it, before half the county's craning necks could make out what it was. "I recognize the cost," he said. He bowed to Lady Evelina, bowed again to Jane, and walked the length of the bright floor to the doors, while every eye followed and no mouth found anything to say, and left the joke lying where it had fallen, dead in the middle of the ballroom, with its owner standing over it. "Jane, you have to let me say it." "You may say good morning," Jane said, and passed the toast. The morning room at Ockley Hall was cold at the edges and warm at the small table by the window, where the sisters were permitted to breakfast when Lady Evelina slept late. Sophie had not touched her tea. She was 20, thin from the winter fever that had nearly taken her. She had cried half the night. Jane had heard her through the wall and let her be, because some crying wants a witness, and some wants a door between. "You did it in front of the county," Sophie said. "For me, you'll let me be sorry for that, or I'll—" "You'll what? Refuse your breakfast at me?" Jane buttered the toast and set it on her sister's plate. "Listen to me once, and then we won't speak of it again. Her ladyship offered me terms. I proposed to the Duke at the opening ball. I tell no one what was arranged. I do not take the proposal back before the last assembly, the 30th of April. In exchange, you stay here, fed and housed and let alone, until the 29th, when Mother's legacy is yours and no one can put you out of anywhere. And if the legacy proves too small, you get a clean reference in her ladyship's own hand. If I break any part of it, you're dismissed the same day, with no reference at all. That is the whole of the arrangement. I heard it, I understood it, and I took it. In front of 6 of her friends. Witnesses were the point. A bargain her set has watched her make is a bargain she must be seen to keep." Jane poured the tea. "A season of being laughed at, against the rest of your life standing on its own ground. I have been offered far worse trades at this house, and taken them for less." Sophie's chin came up. "And you won't let me even thank you?" "No, because if you spend March and April being grateful, then she has made us both into a debt. And I didn't go down on that floor so you could spend your one life paying me back." Jane caught herself and softened it. "You owe me a long life in which you are well. Nothing else. Now eat." Sophie ate. It was the first thing that had gone according to plan since the music started. The plan had not included the Duke calling at Ockley before noon. He was shown into the morning room because Lady Evelina was still abed, and the footman panicked, and stood just inside the door, hat in hand, conscious of being a very large object in a small, warm place. Sophie rose, wobbled on the curtsy, and was gone with one wide look at Jane. "Miss Weller." He stayed standing. "I'll say my business plainly. Last night I answered before I understood what I was standing in. If my acceptance has made your position here worse, I will withdraw it this morning publicly and take the ridicule on myself. Do you want that?" Jane understood, with a small cold drop of the heart, that he had offered the one thing she could not safely reach for. "No, Your Grace." "Then let me settle whatever it is that's being held over you. Name the sum." "There is no sum." She kept her voice level. "And if you bought away the thing that presses on me, I would belong to the buyer. You would be gentler about it than she is. You would still be the hand on the lease." He was quiet a moment, taking it in, actually taking it in, as almost no one of his rank ever took in a refusal. "Then tell me what you can afford to tell me. That I knew what I was doing at the ball, that I chose it, with my eyes open, for a reason I cannot explain, without the explanation costing someone I love her shelter. That is everything I can give you. I will not lie to you beyond it. If silence offends you, withdraw. Silence doesn't offend me." He turned his hat once in his hands, Then hear my terms, since you've heard hers. I have demanded a waltz of every assembly, for reasons of my own, and they were not kind ones, and they are not your burden. But the dance itself I will ask for, each Friday, fresh. No yes you give me carries forward to the next, and nothing you refuse me will ever be collected some other way. Why would a man arrange to be refused 9 times running? 9 times is not certain, he said, and there might have been something dry and alive under it, gone before she could be sure. The door opened on Lady Evelina, dressed for callers after all, smiling like a hostess. "Your Grace, how early? Have you heard? The county has already found a name for our Jane. They are calling her the leap-year Duchess. He will come late, greet the marchpanes and leave before the waltz," said a voice near the door of the Belrose assembly rooms. "Depend upon it, a man corrects a mistake by starving it." Laurence Greaves, 7th Duke of Cairncross, heard his own verdict pronounced as he came up the stairs. It told him what the county had decided in 4 days. The acceptance was a spasm of gallantry, or spite, that the leap-year Duchess would be left to wilt by the wall, and that everyone might then enjoy the wilting. The Belrose rooms were long and gold and loud, and the final assembly of the season, the 30th of April, would be held under these same chandeliers. He intended the county to remember tonight, when that night came. Jane Weller stood at the far edge of the light, in the grey silk of a woman dressed by her employer's charity, wearing the composure of a soldier who expects the next volley, and has decided not to duck. Lady Evelina had placed her there, visible, retrievable, a joke kept warm. Between the door and that far wall stood the marchpane party, 2 baronets, a bishop's widow, every person of rank he was obliged to greet first, all turning toward him with the confidence of people who have never been passed over. Laurence crossed the room, past the baronets, past the bishop's widow, whose mouth opened. The crowd's murmur ran ahead of him like spilled water. He arrived in front of Jane Weller with the gold length of Belrose watching, and pitched his voice so it would carry 3 rows deep. "Miss Weller, the waltz is 4th tonight. May I have it?" She did not answer at once. The musicians were tuning. A violin wandered up a scale and down again, 1 full phrase, while she looked at him and the county held its breath. He stood and let it happen. She was making him wait in public, and he found, inconveniently, that he admired it. "You may, Your Grace." The murmur broke like a wave on shingle. He bowed and withdrew, and heard, behind him, rank rearranging itself around a fact it could not digest. He had crossed first, to her, before anyone. When the 4th dance came, she gave him her hand at the top of the phrase. They went down the floor, under more scrutiny than a public hanging. "You've spent something tonight," she said, crossing to me in front of the marchpanes. "I watch runes for my living, Your Grace. That had a price, and you paid it on purpose." "I had the money," he said dryly. "Say what you're circling. Why did you accept me?" The music turned them. He had known the question would come, and had rationed his answer like water on a long march. "Because I recognized the shape of the joke," he said. "I had seen it before. I did not like how it ended the first time." "Where did you see it?" "That is not mine to tell. There is a woman inside that story who never gave me leave to repeat it." He felt her go still in the frame of his arms, reading him, and let her read. "And the little ivory thing you took off the floor." His hand tightened before he could govern it. The counter was in his waistcoat pocket now. He had carried it 4 days, the crescent nick finding his thumb like a scar finding weather. "Older than your proposal," he said. "That is all I will say tonight. I have already said it to the only person in this county I'd say it to." She was quiet for the length of a phrase. It was not a peaceful quiet. He had given her honesty with a locked door in the middle of it. When the music ended, an old lady with a cane and a face like weathered oak was stationed exactly where they came off the floor. Mrs. Harcourt. He knew her slightly. county fixture, bad hip, feared by hostesses on 3 counts, all 3 of them her tongue. "Miss Weller," said Mrs. Harcourt in a voice built to be overheard, "there is a seat beside me and a draught by the wall. I'd take the seat if I were you. I bite, but only upward." He watched Jane sit down beside the one woman in the room whose regard could not be bought or frightened, and thought, "There, it has begun to turn." Lady Evelina intercepted Jane at the supper-room door an hour later. He was near enough to hear it, and was meant to be. "Enjoy your season, my dear," she said, kind as frost. "But do remember that a duke may cross a room for revenge quite as easily as for desire. The two look alike at a distance. They even dance alike." "I have a proposal," the Duke said, on the Monday evening, at the door of the Ockley Conservatory. "A poor word for it. I have a suggestion." Jane had been sent to cut hothouse flowers for the card tables, which was the kind of errand Lady Evelina invented when she wanted Jane visible to her guests, but not audible among them. The conservatory was warm and green, and smelled of wet earth. The Duke had appeared in it as weather appears, without negotiation. "I'm listening, Your Grace." 1 hour in which neither of us mentions the proposal, your sister, marriage, the county, or your employer. Any of those words ends the hour. We speak as though we had met at, I don't know how ordinary people meet. "They don't," Jane said. "Not a companion and a duke. There is no room in England we'd both be standing in by accident. We're standing in this one. You walked here on purpose. Then the hour begins now, before you can rule it out of order." He sat himself down on the potting bench, on the end of it, leaving the good half for her, and looked honestly uncertain what a man said next. She clipped stems and let him flounder for a moment, because it was educational. "What do?" she said at last, "when no one requires you to be anywhere?" "I read agricultural reports." "That is the saddest sentence I have heard this winter, and I have had the winter I've had. They're very sound reports." A pause. "What do?" "I sit still where nobody can see me," she said, "and I don't mend anything, and I don't answer anything, and I let my face do whatever it likes, sometimes for a quarter of an hour together." "What is it like?" "I've no idea. The whole point is not to check." The hour went like that, and better than that. They discovered a shared dislike of being watched while eating, which he said was the ruin of every public dinner of his life. She said it was the entire condition of being a companion who eats every meal in the exact center of someone else's boredom. They disagreed about silence. He liked it empty, she liked it full. A kitchen 2 rooms off, rain on glass, proof the world went on without requiring anything of her. He wanted to know what she missed most from her father's house. "Doors I was allowed to close," she said. He did not flinch or pity her, only nodded slowly like a man taking down figures he intended to keep. Midway through, the youngest housemaid came in with a taper to light the lamps, shivering, her breath showing even in the warm room. Jane, without breaking her sentence, moved her own chair back from the stove and turned the good warm corner toward the girl, and stood to hold the taper steady over the far lamps so the girl could stay by the heat, and finished her sentence, and never named what she had done. The little maid went out warmer than she had come in. The Duke watched all of it, and thought with quiet interior violence that he had seen women perform charity all his life as they performed the harp, and that this had not been a performance because there had been no audience in it, not even herself. "You are staring, Your Grace." "I am revising," he said. "It's slower." Toward the end of the hour, she made the joke. It was at his expense. It concerned agricultural reports, and what it supposed about the marginal notes he made in them was so exactly, fatally accurate that the Duke of Cairncross laughed. Not the short social note she had heard him produce at Belrose. A real one, startled out of him, too loud for the glass room, one that plainly had not been let out in company for years and did not know where to stand. He looked almost embarrassed. She decided, on the spot, not to be merciful about it, and made it worse with one additional observation, and got a second one. When the hour was done, she gathered up her flowers. At the door she stopped. "Thank you," she said plainly, with nothing folded inside it. "You gave me 60 minutes in which I did not have to defend anything. I can't remember the last ones I had." He stood and bowed and said nothing at all, which was the correct answer. It was only later that night, undressing for bed, reaching by habit to move the ivory counter from waistcoat to dressing table, that Laurence found he had forgotten it was in his pocket. All evening he stood with the little scarred thing in his palm, and could no longer say with certainty which enterprise he was engaged in. "Miss Weller." Mrs. Harcourt's voice went down the Cranwell assembly rooms like a bell dropped down a stairwell. "The musicians are ready when you are. Shall we have our waltz now, or shall we let the soup cool a little longer?" The question was addressed. Every soul present could see where the old woman's eyes were pointed, not to the master of ceremonies, not to the two countesses by the fire, not to the Duke of Cairncross, but to the paid companion in grey silk standing 3 feet inside the door. Cranwell was smaller than Belrose, lower in the ceiling, warmer, a room where the county came to be comfortable rather than magnificent, and in the beat of quiet that followed, Jane understood exactly what was being done. Mrs. Harcourt presided here by right of 40 years and a cane. She had just spent that standing out loud on Jane, before the Duke had even reached her side, so no one could say his rank had carried it. There are moments a woman can decline, and moments that decline is itself an answer. Jane did not look at Laurence, or at Lady Evelina either, though she could feel that attention on her cheek like heat from a grate. "Now I think, ma'am," she said, "soup forgives. Musicians don't." "Quite right," said Mrs. Harcourt, and thumped the cane once on the boards. The music began because Jane Weller had said so. Laurence came to her through the forming couples. If he had heard what had just happened, and he had, all of it, he had the sense not to gild it. "Miss Weller, this one, if you're willing." "I'm willing." They joined the turning floor. Cranwell's musicians took the tempo gently, in deference to the average age of the company, and the slower phrases left more room for speech than Belrose had. Jane had come with questions, and she meant to spend every phrase on them. "Last Friday you said you'd seen the shape of this joke before," she said. "Tonight I'll have the next piece. What did it cost you accepting me? The truth, not the gallant version." He was quiet through half a turn. "The gallant version is that it cost nothing. I didn't engage you for the gallant version." "No, you didn't. The music carried them past the fire, past the countesses." "It cost me the story I have told about my family for 16 years, he said. That we were cold but correct. That whatever was done in my father's day, and my brother's day was done within the rules. I stood in your ballroom a fortnight ago, and I could not tell that story any more, not even to myself. Accepting you was the end of pretending my people were innocent. That is not a wound, Miss Weller, but it was the price." She heard the honesty in it, and heard, under the honesty, the same locked door as before. 16 years. A woman inside the story who had never given him leave. "Then answer one more, plainly. Am I a penance?" The phrase ended. The music turned them, began again. Still he had not answered. "You dance beautifully for a man weighing his words," she said. "You'll have honesty or nothing. I don't know what you are," he said, rougher than anything she had heard him produce in public. "You were meant to be something else. What you have turned out to be, I have no name for yet. That is not a no, Your Grace." "It is not a no," he agreed, quietly, and it plainly cost him more than the family confession had. Jane finished the dance, because it was hers to finish, in the fullest sense it had ever been. She kept her frame, kept her phrasing, thanked him at the close with exactly the courtesy the occasion required, and not one dram more warmth, and walked to the seat that was now hers by custom, at Mrs. Harcourt's right hand, and did not once show him what his half-answer had done, which was to hurt where she had not authorized anyone to reach. "You've the look of a woman doing sums," said Mrs. Harcourt, not looking at her. "Only checking a total, ma'am." Check it twice. In my experience, the men worth having are the ones who count against themselves." The old lady settled her cane. "And the men worth nothing at all are the ones who arrive at an answer quickly. He was slow tonight. Slow is promising." It was at the Cloaks, at the end of the evening, that Lady Evelina appeared beside her, scented and unhurried, watching the Duke's back where he stood among the departing carriages. "Poor Cairncross," she said pleasantly. "All that conscience, and nowhere to put it. Do you know, my dear, I begin to think he has finally found a use for you, a woman poor enough to carry a rich man's conscience for him. It's the one service you people are always hiring out." "Tell me what you want this room to learn," Jane said at the first turn at Belrose. "You've bought 9 Fridays of it. A man doesn't buy a schoolroom without a lesson in mind." Laurence had the answer ready before he could inspect it. "I want the laughter to change sides." She looked at him for a full phrase of music. He watched the words land and be weighed on that fine exact scale she kept behind her eyes. "That's retaliation, Your Grace, not care. A room where the laughter has changed sides is still ruled by it." The music turned them past the fiddlers before he answered. She had put her finger through the fabric of what he had told himself since the 1st of March. "You're right," he said. He felt her surprise in the frame of her arm, a small stillness. "Say that again slowly. You're right. I've spent this month building a better court and calling it justice. It's the same court, different defendant." Something bolted down a long time moved in his chest. "All my life I have been among people who keep score, Miss Weller. You are the first person I've met who appears to keep none. I find I don't have another system ready." "Learn one," she said, but her voice had changed. The blade was still in it. Something else had joined the blade. The dance ended. It was past 1 when the company spilled out to the carriage line, where the March night had turned clear and bitter cold, breath showing, the horses stamping sparks of frost off the cobbles, torch flames standing up straight and golden in the still air. Lady Evelina's carriage was late in the line. Laurence stood with Jane at the edge of the torchlight, correctly in view of 40 people, while grooms shouted names down the row. Jane's gloves were kid, thin as paper, bought thin by her employer's economy. He watched her flex her fingers twice against the cold and did precisely nothing. Doing was not his to initiate. He had learned that in a month. What she did next, she did looking at him. She drew off her right glove, bare fingers in the freezing air, and held the hand out. Not a lady's gesture, nothing from any ballroom. A plain human hand, offered cold. "You've stood there being careful at me for 5 minutes," she said. "It's the coldest night of the year, Your Grace. You may warm my hand if you'd like." "I'd like," he said. "You're certain? I took the glove off, didn't I?" He put down his own gloves and took her cold hand between his bare palms. The world contracted to that one warm pressure in the frozen dark. The torches and the horses and the county all somewhere else entirely. Neither of them said one word about it. Her hand was small and chilled and work-hardened, a writing callus on the middle finger, a needle scar on the thumb. He held it the way you hold something you have no right to, and have been lent anyway. "Well," said Lady Evelina, from 6 feet away into the cold. She had come down the steps without her party furred to the chin. She stood in the torchlight, looking at their joined hands with an expression Laurence had seen once across a card table on a man who had just watched his last trick taken. "How affecting," she said. "My dear Jane, do go and see what keeps my carriage. No, stay. What I have to say does better with both of you." She came a step closer. Her voice lost its evening polish and came out plain. "You think this is new? Whatever it is you're feeling, it isn't. He is paying a debt, Miss Weller, an old one. It was contracted before you ever came into this county. It was not contracted with you, and when it is paid, you will learn what the security was." Her eyes went to Laurence's coat, precisely to the pocket where the counter lay, as if she could see through the wool. "He knows the game. He's holding one of the fish." She went back up the steps. Jane stood with her bare hand still in his, and did not take it back, which he noted. "At Crownwell next Friday," she said quietly, "you will tell me the whole of it. Not the shape, not the locked version, all of it, or the Friday's end, whatever it costs me." "You'll have it," Laurence said, "all of it. It was always going to come due." He gave her back her hand, and handed her up into the arriving carriage, and stood in the cold, watching the lamps go away down the avenue, with his palms still warm, thinking that next Friday he would be a smaller man in her eyes than he had ever been in anyone's. Lady Evelina did not wait for the music. She came to them at the head of the Crownwell rooms while the couples were still forming. She brought no witnesses. Jane understood that to be the most dangerous version of her. Lady Evelina, in private, spoke only when she held every card. "Before you dance, my dear, you'll want your history. His Grace has promised it tonight. No, don't look startled, Your Grace. My woman had it from the groom who stood at your carriage door, and a cold groom sells what he overhears before the horses are stabled. And it is my history, as it happens, so you shall have it from its owner." She arranged her shawl, unhurried, a gamester settling in for the rubber. In the year 8, this county had another leap-year joke, a companion that time as well, 17 years old, very poor, very trusting. Certain young men of fashion wagered whether she could be brought to propose to a visiting gentleman of rank, and their leader salted the girl's courage for a fortnight, how fortune favours the bold, until the little fool believed it, and made the proposal. And the room, she said with no change of tone, laughed until the candles shook. The gentleman refused her in 11 words. "I have never forgotten the number. Count a thing, and it cannot eat you." Jane stood very still. "It was you." "It was me." Lady Evelina smiled, a hostess admiring her own table. "And the young men of fashion recorded their stakes on ivory gaming counters, called fish, as gamesters did. And the leader of that set, the one who invented me, salted me, staged me, was the elder brother of the present Duke of Cairncross, who is holding one of those very counters in his pocket, and has been holding it since the night of your proposal. Make him tell you how he comes to recognize it, Jane. Make him tell you what he was doing in that room in the year 8 at 18, while I was down on that floor. And do not flatter yourself that I gambled on his refusal," she went on. "I did not require one ending, Jane. I arranged both. Refuse you, and you are the county's joke. Accept you, and I hold his conscience in one hand and your sister in the other. The companion of the year 8 married an old man's fortune the season after, and buried him, and has not been poor or laughed at since." The music was beginning. Couples were turning to their places, and the three of them stood in the eddy at the head of the floor. "I was watching," Laurence said. Every word came out flat and exact. "I understood what my brother had built. I did not stop it. And when the room laughed, I laughed. Once. It is the only time in my life I have wished a sound unmade. Afterward, I went to her in private and offered money and silence, because I was ashamed, and shame with money in its hand looks remarkably like cowardice. It was cowardice. There is the whole of my conduct, Miss Weller." "And the night you accepted me?" Jane heard her own voice level, a stranger's voice conducting an inquiry. "I saw her counter roll across the floor, and knew the game had been rebuilt, with her hand running it this time. I accepted to break it, to refuse the refusal, to make my family's old cruelty stand in a ballroom and be seen." He did not lower his eyes. He handed her every stone she could throw. "You began for me as a means, Miss Weller, atonement to one woman paid through another. It took me weeks to understand that this is the same sin in gentler clothes. I would rather it ruined me tonight than kept working underneath us. "The waltz, your grace," said Lady Evelina, gently, terribly. "You've bought it. It's begun." Jane looked at the turning floor. Every doorway stood open to her leaving. Lady Evelina had arranged the moment so leaving was the scripted exit, the little companion running from the room. "Yes," Jane said. "It's begun. Dance with me, your grace. You may answer questions as we go." The frame of his arms was the same, and everything in it was different. She spent the first phrase in silence, and then took the dance apart as she had once watched a housekeeper take apart a clock. One piece at a time, laid out in order, nothing thrown. The first Friday at Belrose, crossing to me before the March panes. Her scheme, or me? Her scheme, mostly. I wanted the county to see the joke fail. The hour in the conservatory, the reports, the maid at the stove. You, only you. There was no audience. Audiences were the point of the scheme. I have checked that hour 100 times since. It holds. The carriage line. You, he said. His voice dropped its evenness for one syllable and found it again. By the carriage line it was you, and I knew it. And I said nothing, because the man who spoke would have had to say the rest. Tonight the rest is said. You should know, she said, that she means this dance to break me. It will not break me. I went in with my eyes open, your grace. I will not now faint over learning that you accepted with yours shut. The music closed. She stepped back out of his arms and curtsied, correct to the inch, while the county applauded the musicians. Shame is not the wound, he said quietly. The wound is that I let you warm my hands while the account was still hidden. Shame I can carry. That I am seeking leave to repair. Then hear the terms, your grace. The title sat between them now like a dropped glove. Neither would pretend not to see. The next time you come to me with a question, come with a reason that belongs to me. Not to her, not to the year 8, not to your brother's ghost or your family's name. Mine, or do not come. She left him at the head of the floor with the music dead. It was Lady Evelina's face she passed on the way out, patient, a woman who had waited 16 years and could wait a Friday more. He did not cross the room for her this time. He walked to her at an ordinary pace, by an ordinary route, past no one who mattered, and stopped at plain-speaking distance and saw her register the difference. No theatre. She had ordered it struck. He had struck it. Miss Weller, the waltz tonight, if you're willing. If you're not, I'll stand wherever you'd like me to stand. A week had passed since Cromwell, and what had settled in her face was not forgiveness. It was something he respected more, a provisional willingness to keep weighing. One condition, she said. During this dance you will give me one honest answer, and you will attach no strategy to it, and you will make no attempt, tonight or after, to improve my circumstances. No livings discovered for convenient curates, no cottages that happen to fall vacant. I've learned how rich men apologize. Agreed, he said, though you've just disarmed most of what I know how to do. I know, she said. Dance with what's left. What was left had to stand up in front of a county that had spent a week chewing Cromwell's gossip to rags. Word had travelled that something had passed among the three of them at the head of the floor. Lady Evelina had seen to the travelling, and seen to its shape, the Duke's black family secret, the companion's sordid bargain, no names quite spoken. Belrose watched them take the floor as a crowd watches a wall with a crack in it. Mrs. Harcourt, from her chair by the second pillar, said at full carrying volume as Jane passed on the Duke's arm, "Miss Weller, you'll sit by me at supper. I've kept the chair. I'll keep it every assembly this season, so the room may as well learn the furniture. It was the most efficient act of war he had ever seen conducted from a chair. One sentence, and every hostess in Belrose knew Jane Weller's seat at the top table was permanent. The music began. Jane came into frame at the correct distance and said, "Now, my question. Go on." The scheme broke at Crownwell. She rebuilt the joke. You refused the refusal. The county saw. Whatever you owed the year 8, it was paid the night you told me the truth at your own expense. Her eyes held his through the turn. So why are you here, Your Grace? There's no scheme left to serve. Give me the reason that belongs to me. He had deliberately prepared nothing, because she would hear preparation as a piano tuner hears a false string. Because of Wednesdays, he said. Wednesdays. The assemblies are Fridays. By Wednesday, I find I am listening for it. Your yes, not the dance. The dance is only where they keep your yes. I have arranged my entire week around the sound of a single word from you. And there is no strategy in it, Miss Weller. It serves nothing. It has simply happened to me. I am informing you of it, as a man reports weather to the person it is about to rain on. The music carried them half a turn in silence. That is not love. I won't call it that, he said. You are still bound to a proposal you cannot take back, and a man who says love to a woman who cannot leave the room is only decorating the lock. I'll say the rest when you're free, or never, as you choose. But you'll have the answer entire. There is nothing left in these Fridays for me but you. Jane looked away, over his shoulder, the length of one phrase, and when she looked back, her eyes were bright and hard at once, like frost with sun on it. I won't be your absolution, she said. Understand that. Whatever this is or becomes, I will not spend my life as the proof that you turned out well after all. Absolution isn't yours to supply, he said. It isn't anyone's. What I did at 18 stays done. There's no arithmetic where you cancel it. If I wanted a proof I turned out well, I'd commission a portrait. It would listen better and cost less. It startled something bright out of her, quick and real and gone at once. She sat at supper in the kept chair. He watched from down the table, the old woman's cane hooked on the cloth. When the carriages were called, he had almost forgotten what county they lived in. Jane came back to Ockley past midnight, and knew before her candle reached the corridor that something was wrong. Sophie's door stood open. Sophie's room stood empty. Stripped bed, cold grate, her sister's hairbrush gone from the sill. A housemaid, pale in the stairwell, whispered it, her ladyship's orders, this evening, while the household was at Belrose. Miss Sophie was moved to the north wing, where the chimneys smoked and no bells were hung, where Ockley kept the furniture it had not yet decided to burn. Jane found her by candlelight, and did not spend the night on outrage. She dragged a mattress in beside her sister's, had the flue cleared under the housekeeper's nose, and packed the bed with hot bricks wrapped in flannel. Evelina had meant the room to frighten them. Jane would not let it make Sophie ill. Lady Evelina made her announcement in the Crownwell cloakroom at its fullest hour, to Jane and the Duke together, with Sophie close enough to hear every word, which was not carelessness. Nothing her ladyship did with an audience ever was. A small clarification of terms, since the season has grown so warm. If any money of Cairncross's touches my household, if there is a house taken for the sister, a living found, a promise written, so much as a doctor's bill paid, the arrangement is ended that hour, and ended as broken. Broken by you, Jane. You know what follows. She drew on her gloves, finger by finger. The trunks are already packed, my dear. It wants only cause. Do give his grace a pleasant evening. He looks so tired of being careful. She went into the card tables, trailing her set behind her like a wake. Sophie had gone white, then angry, which Jane found she was proud of. She packed my trunks. She stood in my room and watched it done. Jane. Not here. Hold my fan, look bored, and breathe. We are being watched by 40 people, and boredom is the only face that tells them nothing. Sophie held the fan and manufactured boredom, weeks of practice showing, and under it, lo, listen to me. If staying under her roof is a knife she holds at you, then I will leave it. I'll take service somewhere. I'm strong enough now, or near enough. I won't be the thing she cuts you with, not for 3 more weeks, not for 3 more days. And you'd do it too, Jane said, and let her sister see, for one breath, everything that sentence moved in her. So hear my answer once. You will not put yourself out on a road in April, convalescent, without a reference to spare my feelings. That is not protection. That is the same coin she trades in. Sacrifice, passed hand to hand, until nobody's holding anything else. 20 days, Sophie. Then the money is yours, and every door in England opens from the inside. Endure being loved until then. That's all I want of you. Sophie's mouth trembled, and then set, their mother's line arriving in her jaw. 20 days, and then I'm never bored again in my life. The moment came late in Cranwell's programme. When the Duke came for his question, plainly, at speaking distance, Jane gave him her yes, and they went down the warm, crowded floor. He had heard the cloakroom terms. The rooms adjacent had heard them. That had been their purpose. Tell me what you need, he said at the first turn. Tonight. Name it, and it will be arranged before the candles are out. Nothing. Do nothing. His frame did not falter, but she felt what it cost him, a big deliberate man with every means in England idle in his hands. Miss Weller. I could have the sister settled by Tuesday. A cottage, a companion of her own, a surgeon, and by Wednesday the bargain is broken. Me, and the reference is ash, and everything I bought on that floor on the 1st of March is spent for nothing. 3 weeks short of the finish. She kept her voice to the music's cover. She has built a trap where your money is the spring, Laurence. The only losing move left to me is to be rescued. So I require the hardest service a man of your kind can render. Stand there in all your power and do nothing. She had used his name. She heard it herself only after it was out. She watched it land in him and be put away somewhere careful, like a coin found on a church floor. Then witness what I can do, he said, and on the next pass, at the point of the floor nearest Mrs. Harcourt's chair in the supper doorway, where the county's ears stood thickest, the Duke of Cairncross said, at a volume engineered to carry without appearing to try, You may tell anyone who inquires, Miss Weller, that I am ashamed to have offered you nothing, and that you have accepted exactly that. No settlement, no house, no promise, not a shilling, though God knows I've tried. You are the one soul in this county who has never cost me a penny. It went down the rooms like water finding a channel. Jane saw it travel. A turned head, a repeated phrase, fans angling together. By supper, the county would possess the one fact Lady Evelina most needed buried, that whatever the leap-year Duchess had proposed for, it had not been money. That was not nothing, she said. It was the truth, standing still, he said. You forbade rescue. You never forbade testimony. They finished the dance in a silence that had some peace in it, the first since Cranwell. It was paid at Ockley, at 1 in the morning. Sophie's trunk stood in the front passage, corded and labelled, where every caller and housemaid must pass them. A countdown built of luggage, arranged where Jane would see it first by candlelight. She stood a long moment reading what the room had been arranged to say. It said that the 29th was a long way off, that her ladyship had packed Jane's heart in straw, and that she could carry it out that door whenever Jane forgot whose house this was. What would you do, Jane said, with an ordinary morning? The Ockley Conservatory again, then, the Monday after, a broken card party for an excuse, the thick, warm smell of wet earth all around them. The rule of the hour stood without being restated. Nothing about the county, the bargain, anyone's sister or anyone's employer. An island an hour wide. Laurence considered the question with the seriousness that was his one extravagance. "I don't know," he said at last. "That is the honest answer. I have not had an ordinary morning since I'm not sure I have had one. There were my father's mornings, and then the regiment's mornings, and then my brother died, and now there are the estate's mornings. Somebody has always sent up the day's requirements with the shaving water. If you gave me a morning with nothing required of me, I'd stand in the middle of it like a man whose horse has been stolen. You'd read agricultural reports." "I'd read agricultural reports," he admitted. "And you'd sit still somewhere with your face unsupervised. We are neither of us fit for liberty. We'd have to be taught, like the maid teaching the new girl which stairs creak. Who teaches it? Nobody teaches it. You just live next to someone who's learning it too." The sentence arrived somewhere it had not been aimed, and sat there, and neither of them moved to take it back. Beyond the glass, the April evening went down green and gold over the kitchen garden. A blackbird went over its one phrase, patiently, over and over. She watched Laurence turn a leaf of the lemon tree between two fingers, careful of the stem, a big man gentle with a small thing because gentleness was the only size it came in. "I would want the mornings to be like this hour," he said. "That's as near as I can get to it. Not this room, this arrangement of persons." He let the leaf go. "I've had a great many rooms, Miss Weller. I find it was always the arrangement of persons." "Say the plain version," she said. "You're better at it than you think." He turned from the lemon tree and looked at her, and the look had no strategy left in it anywhere. She had watched the strategy die out of that face across 6 weeks, as ice goes off a pond, by degrees and then all at once. "The plain version is that I would like to kiss you," Laurence said, "and I am asking." The wanting rose in her so fast and entire that it frightened her. 6 weeks of hands and phrases and honesty at arm's length, all of it arriving at once at a door it could not use. She let herself feel the full size of it before she answered. "No," she said, "not because it isn't wanted. I want to be plain too. It is wanted. But I am still a woman who proposed under orders, and you are still the man whose acceptance I can't walk away from. And while those two things stand, a kiss can't prove what I'd needed to prove. If I kissed you tonight, I could never be sure I hadn't done it, as I have done everything else this season, because the room required it. When I kiss you, if I kiss you, I will be a woman who could have left the room." He took it as he had taken her judgment all season. No flinch, no bargaining, no reaching for a smaller touch to fill the space where the kiss was not. He straightened, inclined his head and said, "Then it keeps. Whatever else you've taught this county, you've taught me that a thing refused cleanly is not a thing lost." "It keeps," she agreed. They both heard the promise underneath, dated for a freer season. The hour was ended by Lady Evelina's voice from the conservatory door, unhurried, pleasant, timed, Jane understood, to the minute. "There you are. What a picture of botany. Jane, my love, a change in the season's programme. I find I want a wedding date. You'll announce it at Belrose on Friday. The 16th of April. How tidy. Or I shall conclude the engagement is a fiction, in breach of everything we agreed. Sophie will be off my hands by Saturday breakfast. The trunks, as you know, are ready. Good night, Your Grace. Mind the lemon tree, it marks." She was gone before either of them could arrange a word. "Jane," Laurence's voice was very quiet, "one question, and then I'll obey whatever you answer. Friday, in front of them all, do you want me to release you? Publicly, entirely, tonight's cost be hanged?" "Put it to me during the waltz," she said. "You'll have your answer at Belrose, where the county can hear it." Laurence felt the counter in his waistcoat pocket, like a coal before Lady Evelina said a word. She had chosen her ground with a general's eye, the head of the Belrose rooms, the interval before the waltz, the county banked 3 deep, with nothing to do but listen. "The county grows impatient, Jane," she said, her voice pitched for the chandeliers. "A proposal in March, and no date by the middle of April. When is the wedding, my dear? Or has His Grace's famous word developed a stammer?" Laurence watched Jane absorb the volley and decline, composed, either to blush or answer. "Dates are dull, Lady Evelina," said Mrs. Harcourt from her chair. "It's the dancing the county comes for. I speak for the county. I've outlived most of it." Amusement, real and grateful, took the room's attention, and under its cover Laurence crossed to the musicians' gallery at the head of the floor. He did it slowly enough for Jane to watch. He took the ivory counter out of his pocket, his own stake from the year 8, the crescent bitten into its edge the night he laughed, 16 years of his family's shame, and set it down on the ledge of the gallery rail, in plain view up among the rosin and the spare strings, and walked back across the open floor to her with both hands empty. "The waltz, Miss Weller, if you're willing." She gave him her hand. The music began, and for one turn she said nothing, and her silence had a grain to it, a thing being milled fine. "You put it down," she said, "where it belongs, with the instruments." He breathed once, slowly. "I carried that thing for 6 weeks, as my family carries everything, hidden and rubbed smooth. It can lie on that ledge till the fiddlers pawn it. The night you proposed, I told myself I was breaking her game. That was true, and it flattered me. Here is the part that doesn't. A man who picks up a counter and plays it, even against the dealer, even for good, is still gaming, and the stake I played with was you. A season of you spent to prove a point about the year 8. At Crownwell, you required of me a reason that belonged to you. Before I can hand it over, I had to put down the one that never did." The music turned them. Her face, this close, was unreadable to the county, and perfectly legible to him, anger and grief and something enormous being held with both hands. "And now you'll finish it," she said. "I know what you came to do tonight, Laurence." She demanded a date, "so you'll give the county the opposite. You'll stop the music and release me, nobly, publicly, at the top of your voice. Freedom delivered to my door like a settlement. Look at me and tell me I'm wrong." He looked at her and could not. "Then hear me before you spend it." Her voice stayed under the music. It had never been harder. "If you free me tonight," she turns Sophie out at dawn. "Broken engagement, broken bargain. She'll call my accepting your release a withdrawal and dare me to contradict her. And 13 days is a long time to be 20 and homeless in April. That's the practical half, and it's the smaller half. The other half is this. You are trying to give me the one thing that matters most in my life. At the moment you chose, on the floor you chose, staged to your best advantage. And that is not freedom, Your Grace. That is generosity, and generosity is just power smiling. I have had 6 years of standing where I was put. I will not be freed where I am put. Not even by you, especially not by you." "Then what would you have me do with it?" The question came out of him raw. "It's yours. It's been yours for weeks. I'm a man holding a door he's not allowed to open." "Hold it," she said. "That's the whole of the service. I will choose the room, and I will choose the night, and I will tell you when. Wait until I ask, Laurence. Can you do that? Can the 7th Duke of Cairncross stand in a county that watches his every breath, wanting to do the decent thing so badly it chokes him, and do nothing at all until a paid companion says now?" One full phrase of music went by, and then another, and another, and the length of that silence was the truest thing he had said all season. "Yes," he said, "though you might remember, when this is over, that it was the hardest yes I ever gave." "I'll remember," she said. "I intend to remember all of it." They finished the waltz to the county's fascination, the demanded date not given, the expected declaration not made, the Duke and the companion turning through the figure with faces like a sealed letter. Laurence handed her to her chair beside Mrs. Harcourt, bowed, and heard the old lady say as he straightened, "Sophie, child, come sit by me a moment. I've a spare room that gets the morning sun, and no opinion in the house but mine. If ever a week wanted crossing, mine is the bridge nearest to. No, don't answer now, bridges keep." And he heard, from across the head of the room, Lady Evelina's voice, sweetened for the audience and aimed at Jane like a slow blade. "No date, then? How brave. Do enjoy the last of the season, my dears. I said Saturday, but I find one more Friday before the county will be more instructive. The 23rd, Jane, mark it." "The next waltz may be the first one I refuse you," Jane said quietly, to him alone, as the room came apart around them. "If it comes to that, no, it won't be you I'm refusing." Lady Evelina arrived early at Crownwell, with Sophie's trunks strapped to her second carriage, and had them left standing in the lamp-lit yard, where the county's coachman could read the labels. Jane saw them from the steps, and understood that the evening had been staged before her ladyship's horses were harnessed. The trunks were scenery. The performance began in the first interval, from the centre of the rooms, in the voice her ladyship kept for verdicts, pitched to reach the card-room. "You will forgive a hostess her housekeeping, my friends, done where you can all witness it, since witnessing is so much the fashion this season. Miss Weller was given until tonight to show her famous engagement was anything more than an adventuress's lease on a duke. There is no date. There will be no date. So, Miss Sophie Weller leaves my household tonight. The trunks are down, 6 days early and not a day too soon. The character I had promised is withdrawn. Charity misled is charity cancelled. And so you know what you have been applauding since March. The leap year proposal you found so stirring was bought and paid for. My bread, my roof, my patience, in exchange for her performance. She has never once denied it. Your Grace caught a fortune huntress. The county has watched her reel you in like a spring trout. From among the banked county, a man's voice, one of the 6 who had stood in her own drawing-room in February, said, not loudly, those were not the terms. There was no wedding date in it, and the girl's day was the 29th. They are now, said Lady Evelina, without troubling to turn her head. A hostess may amend her own hospitality. The rooms went so quiet that Jane could hear the fire settle. With the cold, clear part of her mind, Jane noted the masterwork. Every fact placed true, every meaning placed false. And both women it crushed, standing in the room, while the county decided whether to look at them or away. Laurence had started forward. One step, a man with a county's worth of voice drawing breath, and Jane said quietly, without turning her head, "No, stand behind me. Say nothing. Whatever she says, whatever they think. Sophie answers for Sophie, and I answer for me, and if you speak now it becomes your quarrel and proves her lease." He stopped. She heard him stop. She heard him stay. "Nothing to say, Your Grace." Lady Evelina's smile opened like a fan. "How eloquent! Even her Duke won't spend a word on her." His silence held. It cost him. The county could see what it cost him. That, Jane realized, was the only form this testimony could take. A powerful man, visibly obeying a powerless woman's instruction, in public, at his own expense. Jane's first instinct was to answer for her. She stopped it. A sister was not a debt, and not a ward. Sophie had asked to choose. This time Jane let her. Sophie stepped out from beside Jane. Her hands shook. She was 20 years old, with everything she owned strapped to her tormentor's carriage. Her voice shook on the first word, then walked itself steady. "You needn't send me anywhere, my lady. I'm engaged elsewhere from tonight." She turned to the room, and dipped a small curtsy toward the second pillar. Mrs. Harcourt was kind enough to offer me her spare room some days ago, the one with the morning sun. Ma'am, does the offer keep? Bridges keep, said Mrs. Harcourt, both hands on her cane. I'll thank somebody's footman to shift the young lady's boxes off that carnival float and onto my carriage. Mine's the shabby one. Like its owner, it carries what matters. And it was done, not by a duke, but by an old woman's spare room and a girl's own feet. Jane watched the county, watched the trunks come down, and knew that scenery had just changed plays without its owner's consent. The dance was called late that evening, as if the musicians themselves would rather not have raised the subject. Laurence came to her at speaking distance, his face grey with the long evening's effort, and gave her the question his word required. She heard, under its evenness, that he already knew. Miss Weller, the waltz if you're willing. Not tonight, Your Grace. He stepped back at once, bowed instead. No persuasion, no wounded look, no glance flung at the gallery to show the county how nobly he bore it. He simply honoured the refusal at the speed of an ordinary sentence, and said, "May I have your arm to your sister, then?" and walked her unhurried the length of the watching rooms, past Lady Evelina, to the chair beside Mrs. Harcourt, and left her there with a bow no deeper than the one he gave the old lady. 6 years had taught Jane to read the sound of a room. She knew the county would discuss one thing longest. The coldest man in the county had been told no by a penniless companion at the season's rawest hour, and nothing had happened to her. No frost, no punishment, no withdrawal of his ferocious attention. He had asked. She had declined. He had obeyed. Whatever the two of them had, the county understood at last that it had never once been compelled. At the carriage line she found him waiting, hat in hand, at his now permanent distance. "Bell rose, then," she said. "Friday, the last assembly. You've held the door all season, Laurence. On Friday I will have you open it. The year 8 and all, where the county can hear. Can you stand in that room and be a smaller man than your title, one time, in front of everyone whose good opinion you were raised to keep?" "I've been rehearsing for 16 years, he said. Lady Evelina's voice reached them from her carriage step, bright as struck flint. "Friday, yes. Do come, everyone. I shall bring the old counters. The county may finally reckon what Miss Weller was worth to the piece." Jane did not return to Ockley that night. 6 years of service fitted into one trunk, and Mrs. Harcourt's spare room had acquired a second bed by morning. "Well, Jane," said Lady Evelina, into the waiting brightness of the Belrose assembly rooms, "the season ends tonight. The county is assembled. For the last time, will you name the day you marry the Duke of Cairncross, or shall we all agree at last on what we watched on the 1st of March? She stood at the head of the floor with a little drawstring purse of white kid in her hand. Jane, alone in the centre of the great gold room, heard it click softly, ivory against ivory, like small cold applause. Sophie was 21 as of yesterday morning. The legacy stood confirmed by the early post. The legacy was no fortune, but the solicitor's figures would keep 2 careful women in 2 clean rooms, with food, coal, and a door no employer owned. Nothing in this room could reach her sister again. Jane had walked to the centre, owing no performance to anyone alive. Laurence stopped the musicians with one lifted hand. He came to the edge of the open floor, not to Jane, and turned to face the room. The room, promised an announcement all week, gave him its total silence. "Before anything more is required of Miss Weller, the county will hear what I owe it. It is 16 years overdue, and shame does not improve with length." His voice was even, carrying, stripped of every ornament. In the year 8, a young woman, a companion, 17 and poor, was baited by a set of fashionable men into proposing marriage, publicly, to a man primed to refuse her. When he refused, they settled their stakes on ivory counters, to the room's great entertainment, and the leader of that set was my brother, the late Duke of Cairncross. I was in that room, 18 years old. I understood the machine and did not stop it, and when the room laughed, I laughed with it, once. Then I went to her afterward, privately, with money, to buy her silence, as if cowardice could be paid to change its name. It cannot. I was a coward in the year 8. I have been a coward about it every year since. He turned to the one person in the room it was owed to. Lady Evelina, I wronged you. I say it before the kind of room that heard you shamed, and I ask no forgiveness that would make my conscience your work. Not a fan moved anywhere in Belrose. On the 1st of March, I watched the same machine assembled again, piece by piece, around Miss Weller. I recognized it. I accepted her proposal to jam its wheels, and I tell you now plainly, on that night my acceptance was not love. It was an old debt, paying itself through a woman who had never borrowed. I demanded a waltz of every assembly to keep the county watching, and in doing so I built her a cage with better manners. She saw it before I did. He paused, and what moved in his face was watched by 200 people and offered to one. That ends tonight. I withdraw the demand. No bought dance, no standing claim, no acceptance she must honor. Miss Weller is free of me, and of my family's arithmetic. I ask for nothing. A man who loves a woman does not keep her where she cannot choose him. Those are the only terms on which I understand love at all. He stepped back. The silence had changed its species, but Lady Evelina had lived off rooms too long to lose one to weather. How affecting, she said, and the purse clicked. The Duke repents, the county weeps, and still it stands on her lie. Shall I say what she has never denied? That proposal was purchased. My roof, my bread, her sister's keep were the wages, and she earned them on that floor. She sold a proposal for a season's shelter. Deny it, Jane, before them all. You cannot. I won't, Jane said. She set it into the room's held breath, and walked unhurried to the musicians' gallery, and took up from the ledge the ivory counter with the crescent nick that had lain there since the 16th of April. She drew off her right glove, set the counter in her bare palm, and held it up, and the chandeliers found it, a yellowed oval, 16 years old, light as a tooth. Every word of the price is true. The county deserves the terms exact. On the 22nd of February, before 6 witnesses of her own set, Lady Evelina offered me this bargain. I would propose to the Duke of Cairncross at the opening ball, publicly, on my knee. I would neither expose the arrangement nor withdraw the proposal before tonight. In exchange, my sister, 20 years old, a little over 9 weeks short of her small inheritance, still weak from a winter fever, would keep her bed, her bread, and her quiet at Ockley Hall until her money made her safe, with a fair character in writing if it did not. If I refused, or told, or begged elsewhere, Sophie went onto the road that week. Those were the terms. Are they fairly stated, my lady? You set them. You should have the crediting of them. Every head turned. Lady Evelina could take the authorship of her own cruelty or deny it before 6 witnesses who knew. Fairly stated, she said at last with terrible lightness. You see? Out of her own mouth. Bought. Bought, Jane agreed. Now the county may hear what it purchased. I knew the Duke was meant to refuse me, and that I would live the rest of my life as the woman this county mocked. I weighed my sister's one life against 2 months of your entertainment, and I would strike that bargain again tonight, and every leap year after, and count myself rich. Her voice did not rise. The room came to it. I took nothing from the Duke. No settlement, no roof, no promise, not a shilling. He has said so himself in these rooms, and her ladyship's own vigilance can confirm it. And when the man they built to refuse me said yes instead, I was offered rescue a dozen ways, and took none, because I would not trade one owner for a kinder one. Whatever I am, I have belonged to myself the whole way through." She turned the counter over once in her palm. "In the year 8, this county did to a girl of 17 exactly what was done to me in March, and it laughed, and she stood alone in a room like this one. No Mrs. Harcourt, no sister, no duke saying 'coward' where the word could cost him. What was done to her was wrong. I have never once laughed at Lady Evelina Dacre. I refuse to begin tonight, when it is finally cheap. But neither will I let what was done to her at 17 stand as a license for what she did to me at 8 and 20. A wound is a reason. It is not a deed of ownership over the next woman. And so the record is complete. His Grace is released. I withdraw the proposal of the 1st of March. It was never mine to make freely, so it was never truly made. There is no engagement. She closed her hand once around the counter and opened it. Now the county knows the price, the goods, and the buyer. Let it say what I was worth. What the county said, it said without a word being given it to repeat. A stranger to Jane, one of the 6 February witnesses, crossed to the musicians' gallery, took an ivory counter from his waistcoat, and set it on the ledge with a small deliberate clink. His wife followed. Then a grey-whiskered gentleman of the year 8's generation, his counter yellowed like the first. Then another, and a woman who had to open a locket to get at hers. 2 seasons of the fashionable set, 16 years apart, laying their stakes down on the ledge, and out of their lives, clink and clink and clink, while Lady Evelina stood still with her little purse hanging from her wrist like an anchor with no ship. "Cowards," she said, into the sound of it, "all of you. It was a game. It was always only a game." No one laughed. No one echoed. The room did not turn on her. It simply, terribly, stopped turning around her. Sophie left Lady Evelina's side of the room then, crossed to Jane in front of everyone, and took her sister's bare hand in both of hers. Her voice broke exactly once on the way through. "She never asked me to be grateful. Not once, the whole way. She did that for me in front of them all, and then made me promise not to thank her for it. That's the fortune she hunted. That's the whole of it. Me. And for 7 nights now," said Mrs. Harcourt, rising on her cane, "the young lady has slept under my roof, on no one's charity and no one's terms, and came into her own money yesterday morning by nothing but the grace of the calendar. So there is nothing left to argue." She looked slowly round the assembly. "I've watched this county 40 years. Tonight is the first time I've been proud of it since the old King's Jubilee. Lady Evelina, you'll yield the head of the room, I think. It wants airing." And then, turning with all of Belrose in her voice, "Miss Weller, the musicians are paid till midnight, and my hip is beyond dancing. Will you open the last waltz of the season for us?" Jane looked at the one question that remained. Laurence, at the edge of the boards where he had kept himself all evening, hands empty, demand dead, title useless, waiting to be told whether he might cross. "The room may have its waltz on one condition," she said. "Someone must ask me properly. I've had 1 season of dances that were demanded. I find I'll take no more of those." Laurence crossed no farther than the edge of her hearing and stopped. The county watched him bow his head as he would at a church rail. "Miss Weller," he said, "may I have the last waltz?" "You may," said Jane. They came together in the middle of the floor, both upright, no knee on the boards, no counter in any hand, nothing binding anywhere in Belrose but the thing that had grown all season in plain sight, without one soul commanding it. The music began. At the final turn, she drew off her left glove as well, and gave him her bare hand, and he took exactly what was offered, and no more, and held it like the one thing in England he had ever been given rather than owed. For 16 years the county had expected refusal from him, and tonight it had come to watch him renounce. What it saw instead was the thing he had never once let it see. The coldest duke in England danced the last waltz of the season with his whole guarded face open, looking down at Jane Weller as though the music were only an excuse to go on holding her hand, and not caring in the least who watched. Some would tell it for years. Not the confession, not the counters laid down, but the way the Duke of Cairncross looked at the companion he had been built to refuse. Over his shoulder, at the emptying head of the room, Jane saw Lady Evelina gather her purse of counters that no one would ever bet against again, and go out of Belrose into the last of April, alone, past 200 people, not one of whom was laughing. "You still owe me a proposal," Jane said at the door when the county had thinned and the candles stood low. "Mind, I never said whose. Wait for me at the carriage line." The carriage line emptied by degrees, lamp by lamp, wheel by wheel, until the Belrose yard held nothing but cold paving stones, one patient waiting coach, and the Duke of Cairncross standing hatless in the small hours of the 1st of May. Laurence heard her step before he saw her. She came out of the doors with her shawl over her head like any servant girl slipping home, and stopped in front of him, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all, because there was no county left to say it for. "You waited," Jane said softly. "The stones were interesting," he said. "I have counted them twice. You noticed that at last, but the dryness had no armour in it any more. It was only the voice she had taught him to use for happiness, there being no other one issued to him young. Go on then, your questions, you'll have them. You always do. 2. First, if I never proposed again, if I took my freedom and my sister and went and lived small and quiet somewhere with doors I'm allowed to close, and you never got more of me than tonight, would the waiting have been worth it to you?" He thought about it, visibly, the way she loved and had never told him she loved, the slow, serious turning over that treated her questions as work worth doing. "Yes," he said. "You'd be free and glad somewhere. I find that's the bedrock. Everything I want above it, I want, but the bedrock holds without the house." Second question. When I do propose, mind the tense, I'm being careful with it. It will be to Laurence, not to Cairncross, not to the 7th Duke, not to the man making amends. The title comes with you and I'll bear it, but I won't marry it. Can you be only Laurence, for the length of one question? "Madam," he said, "with you I have never once managed to be anything else. God knows I tried." So Jane Weller drew off her gloves, both of them, and put them in her pocket, and stood up straight in front of him on the cold stones. No audience, no music, no bargain anywhere on earth with her name in it, and took his bare hand in her bare hand, and asked him in her own words, the ones she had not been given by anyone, "Marry me, Laurence, not because a room requires it, because I looked at my one life this morning, with everything safe and everything possible, and the only thing it still wanted was you in it. I'm asking because I want the mornings, yours and mine, all of them." He looked down at their hands. She felt his close carefully around hers, a man holding the one thing he had been given rather than owed. "You're free," he said, "entirely. You could leave this yard owing me nothing, you're certain." "I could leave," Jane said. "I'm staying. That's all the proof there is, and it's yours." "Then yes," said Laurence, "with my whole life, yes." And the word was the same one he had spent in March in front of 200 people, and it was not the same word at all. This one had nothing in it but the man. "There's an account outstanding," she said, against the small distance between them, "from the Conservatory. I was told it would keep." "It kept," he said. "May I?" "Yes." He kissed her once, carefully, both her hands in his, signing his name to a thing he had read every word of, and she kissed him back, and the 1st of May stood around them in the dark smelling of blown candles and coming green, and no county watched, and that was the point. "The county will call it sudden," she said. "The county," said Laurence gravely, "has never yet been right about us." From the far side of the yard came the deliberate sound of a cane on stone, and Mrs. Harcourt's voice, magnificently unsurprised. "Sophie, child, look away. The quality are settling their affairs." "I'm 21, ma'am," said Sophie's voice, rich with a smile in the dark, "and I shall look at my own family as much as I please." Jane laughed, out loud, unguarded, into the May dark, with nothing anywhere left to defend, and Laurence gathered her hand up onto his arm, and the musicians were gone, and the yard was plain empty stone, and all the same, walking to the coach, the two of them fell without a word into the old 3-beat measure. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, keeping time to nothing at all, no one calling it for them. The last waltz of the season danced on cold paving stones by two people who had finally asked each other everything.